Hi everyone, popping on today to give you your next tips and steps for completing your practice IA. I apologize that I did not get this stuff to you sooner like I promised, but it's been kind of a busy week for me. Miss Kelly is moving into a new apartment and it has proven to be a much larger task than I had anticipated. So thank you for your patience. I'm sure that you've had your own bouts of tardiness in the past few weeks, so we'll just be patient with each other for a little bit. But what I'll do today is walk you through these slides, talk about some of those tips and tricks, and then I'll show you the resources that I use to create my practice and kind of walk you through how to use those. So a couple of quick mentions here. We have only 2 weeks left until all of your final work is due. Technically about 2.5 weeks left in the year. Okay, so we're almost there. We're in our final sprint. You're almost to summer. Don't give up, and remember that it's not too late to start. If you complete this practice IA, you'll be preparing yourself for the actual IA that's going to come at the beginning of next year. So the more work you focus on that now, the easier that task will become in the future. Last but not least, please email me if you have questions. Those who have reached out about their IA and considering their topic and how they can make it strong, fantastic. Please do that. Please keep doing that. I'm happy to walk through ideas with you and give you some guidance on where you might head with your thinking. For Mindful today, I want to remind you that, in my classroom, I have that big chalkboard that's up on the back wall. And what it says is how you show up magnetizes what shows up for you. And so really it's just about understanding that where we put our energy and our efforts is what will grow and what will populate within our lives, right? So if you give your time and energy to things like fear and guilt and worry and doubting yourself, then that's what's going to build up for you. You're just going to have more fear and guilt and worry and self-doubt, right? So you want to focus on, give water, give love to the things that are positive and good in your world. And those things will continue to populate and propagate and be bigger in your life. So today I would love for you to literally give yourself a big hug. Yep. And tell yourself that you love yourself, because self-love is probably the most important type of love that one can experience. Okay, so give yourself a little bit of goodness today. So you will be doing your next practice IA. At this point, you should have, and if you haven't yet, you'll start with the last video. But you should have chosen your 2 40-line sets from each text you're going to compare. And you should have gone back to those, reread them, annotated, and thought about, hey, what are each of these authors sort of revealing about this global issue? How do they address this issue? What is it they're trying to show us? Or what is it they're trying to explore or identify the relationship between? As you start to really, build your analysis, you might find that this focus that you have kind of shifts and adjusts as you go, and that's okay. Be comfortable with that. And in fact, that's good. That's revision. That's what true analysis is to sort of pick away at the parts and then really identify, okay, what am I really trying to say here? So a few tips and tricks that I noticed not only in your practice, your last practice IAs, but also within the one that I did myself. Number 1, context. In order to get criteria A, knowledge and understanding, you have to show that you understand the text. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to give a summary of the whole text because you're focused on only a 40-line set, right? But you do need to show that you understand the characters, what they've experienced. So feel free to reference things that have happened previously or that will happen later on in the text that aren't a part of your 40-line set. You can reference those things and kind of pull them in quickly in order to provide some more context for what you are saying. But truly, you want to make sure that context is sort of sprinkled throughout your entire analysis. You don't want to spend the first however many minutes giving a full rundown of each text. Frankly, you just don't have that much time. So in between your ideas and your analysis is where you'll throw in the context. Who's doing what? What are they doing when this thing happens? How is the setting or the situation of that moment important? Okay. Secondly, you want to make sure you're speaking in present tense. Whenever we analyze literature, we want to assume, right, that someone is reading that book right now in this moment. And so we don't want to reference it as though it's in the past, because it's happening in the book right now if someone were reading that book, right? So instead of saying something like Marjane flees, or yeah, you would want to say Marjane flees Iran instead of Marjan, say her name right too, say names right, instead of Marjan fled Iran, right? You don't want to use the past tense. So really speak in present tense as you go. Thirdly, I'm always talking to you about the importance of independent thought. And this is a big idea for IB. So make sure that, yes, if you are going online to reference some ideas or get some inspiration, that's okay. But make sure that your analysis isn't taken from somebody else online, right? That's plagiarism. And it will award you a 0 ultimately in the end if it matches something else that can be found online. So you can take some of those ideas and make them your own, but really the analysis should be your thinking. What is coming out of your head? What do you see in that moment? And that's what's going to make your strong, independent thought analysis. Fourth, be thoughtful, right? We don't want to make just superficial statements like poverty is bad. Yes, poverty is bad. We know that. And so you really want to try to analyze something that's curious or unclear maybe within the text. Don't just focus on something that's obvious, right? So I've shared here and on Empower a document that sort of breaks down the global issue aspect and gives you some guiding questions or points of focus for when you're trying to really come up with a thoughtful statement about what these authors are doing or looking at. For number 5, make sure that when you start recording, you just jump right in. Some of us on our practice IAs did things like, hi, I'm Cody Kelly. I'm going to be evaluating blah, 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 blah. You don't need to do that. You don't need to say your name at all. You just jump right in. And when you watch my example, you'll see that that's exactly what I do. Additionally, don't make generalized statements about the text. You want it to keep it all super focused because you really don't have a whole lot of time. I know 10 minutes feels like a lot, but once you're actually analyzing 2 texts, you really only have 5 minutes per text. So be careful with that. Don't say things like, there's many issues covered in this book, but I'm going to focus on blank. Leave that out. Just go straight into it and say the author is addressing this, and here's how they're doing it, and here's what I think all that means, okay? Lastly, I think some of us are confusing the IOP with the IA. The IOP was a presentation assessment that we did at the beginning of the year. The IA is not a presentation, rather it's an oral analysis. So there's no need for visuals. You're welcome to incorporate some creative aspect into your analysis, but it's not required. It's not on the rubric. And you shouldn't be going off of slides or showing slides in your IA, because in the actual thing, what this will look like is just you and me, and all I'm evaluating is what you actually say. Okay, so don't incorporate any other visuals. IB has rules about what resources you use in your IA, and we'll cover that here in just a moment. Next, and this is going to be the hardest part for you, which is why I recommend doing multiple tries. I recorded my practice IA 3 times and finally settled on the last one, and I still want to redo it. There's plenty of things in there that I would change. So as you're watching that today, don't think it's perfect. By all means, it's not. There are some things I do well, but there are some things that I would need to fix up and do a bit better for my actual IA in the future. So you want to avoid memorization, right? The goal here is not to sit and read off of a piece of paper. In fact, IB doesn't want that at all. You'll get low scores if you're just reading off of a piece of paper. But you also don't want to fully memorize it like a speech, because then it comes off as distant, right, from your audience. So just like I've been talking to you all year, pretend like you're talking to your friend about this concept. Know it so well that you can just speak about it and you don't have to say exactly a certain word every time. Instead, you understand the concept so well that you can, pull in randomly the words that will work for that idea. But this means that you really have to sit with that concept and reread and really think about it and get it in your head and in your soul so that you can easily just sit here and talk like I'm doing now. That's what you need to do. So what I provided for you today, I've put everything on Empower. So when you're done with this slide, with this video, you'll head over to Empower to the same prompt IA assignment that we were working on through the other day. I've added new steps and new resources for you to look at. So that is where you will complete your steps and whatnot. You will also upload your IA recording there, I think. What I'm going to do is allow you to upload it there, but I'm also going to create a classwork assignment on Google Classroom so that if for some reason Empower is not working, or it's not uploading correctly, or it's not doing what you want it to do, then you can simply submit your IA through Google Classroom. So you have either option, just make sure that it gets submitted in some way and we'll be good. One of the things I've provided for you is my sample IA. It's a little bit over 10 minutes, so, I would need to reduce my time. And again, like I said earlier, it is not perfect. So as you watch, consider, what aspects of my analysis you would want to try to emulate and which aspects of the analysis you want to try to avoid. Like I say, and a lot. I need to stop that, right? I need to practice being able to just say what I need to say. And that comes from knowing your content so well. You're required to deliver your IA with an unannotated copy of your 40-line sets, and then a short outline with only a maximum of 10 bullet points. These are IB requirements. So that means that before you actually deliver your final IA or do your practice recording, you can gather all the things you need. And you're going to see all my documents. I sat down and planned it all out and had annotated copies, and then I turned all that information into a simplified bullet list, and that's what I'm allowed to reference during my actual oral. So you'll want to practice doing that today. You'll notice in my sample video that I am clearly reading off of another analysis document sometimes, and you want to avoid that, right? You want to stick to just your bullet list. So you want that bullet list to be specific, and I'll walk you through mine and how I created it. Last but not least, notice also that you do want to reference your quick short outline. You don't have to look at the screen if you're filming yourself. You don't have to look at the screen the whole time. I'm only evaluating what you say, but it'll be very clear if you're just reading off of something. So be aware of that and really practice and try to get yourself to a place where you don't need to do that. So your next steps is you should have by now read and annotated your 240-line sets and created a working thesis statement. This thesis statement will change and be modified and adjusted as you go, and be okay with that. After you've done that, then you'll complete your analysis plan. I recommend using the analysis outline, the plan that I have shared with you, because it incorporates all the criteria and all the things IB is going to be looking for. So if you fill that guy out, then you'll cover all of the aspects that you're supposed to. After you've sat down and done that analysis plan, then you turn those main ideas into simplified statements that you'll put on your bulleted outline. This is a required IB document. So in the real IA, if we're in person or if we're in Zoom, you're gonna show me your sources, and what you'll have are 2 copies or a copy of each unannotated text, and you'll have your single 10 bullet outline that IB requires. You won't have anything else in the testing room with you. So you want to practice using just that bulleted document. Again, it took me 3 times and I still read too much off of my full analysis, and I would need to still practice that a bit more. You'll record a 10-minute IA using only these 2 things, okay? So a couple of points of interest. Number 1, if you are choosing a 40-line set from a graphic novel, if you're using Persepolis or Watchmen, you will want to pick a 2-page consecutive spread instead of 40 lines. Since graphic novels are more visual in nature, you will want to make sure you're looking at the details of those visual images: color, shape, space, panel transitions, use of contrast or shadowing, symbolism, more so than probably the actual dialogue. You can still analyze the dialogue, and you should, but in those graphic novels, you'll focus more on those visual elements. When you're doing your voice recording, You can do a video or a voice, completely up to you, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Please make sure that you find a quiet place because it's much easier to hear. And if we end up doing this real thing on the virtual setting at the beginning of next year, we can't have any noise interaction or disruption within the recording. IB doesn't like that. So find a nice quiet place, whatever that means for you. I know a teacher that does all of her recordings in her closet. So if that's what you got to do to make it happen, then do what you got to do. You'll do a 10-minute analysis. This is the longest one you've ever done, and it's the full time required by IB. You are comparing and analyzing two texts, right? So you should spend roughly 5 minutes on one text and roughly 5 minutes on another. For those of you who have really been pushing yourself to get that high time, you are going to struggle to get it all in that amount of time. So really make sure that you're being concise and specific and not repetitive with what you're saying. You don't want to go around in circles. You want to get straight to the point and prove it. So what you're going to do now is you're going to make your way over to Empower. I have shared there all of your resources and the next steps for completing your IA. The resources you will find there, number 1 is my example IA. Number 2 is my analysis plan. And number 3 is my IB outline. I'm going to quickly walk you through those pieces here so that you can see what I did and why. And then I'll try to end this video within 20 minutes so that I'm not talking at you for too long. Okay, I'll go do that here in just a minute. A few final notes that you'll need to understand as we move forward. Your practice IA deadline has been extended. Shoot for Friday. If you're behind in life right now and you need a little pick-me-up, then get that done, do what you need to do, and get it done to me as quickly as possible. Once you submit your IA, I'll pair you with a partner for your peer revisions and evaluations that will happen next week. All work for IB Lit junior year is going to be due no later than May 20th so that I have time to grade, evaluate, and update your scores. Last but not least, throughout next week and the following week, we will do those peer evaluations, we'll do a reflection, and then we'll have a final discussion about all of the learning that we've covered for the entire year. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is pop into a folder where I have these documents. You will see here that this is going to be the example recorded IA that you will see. I love how it always stops on the funniest face for the thumbnail, and that's fun. You'll see here, and I'll probably share all this just so you can see it. These are my annotations for the one text I used. These are my annotations for the other. We're going to take a look at the analysis plan first. So if you open the analysis plan, as it's loading. Okay, you'll see here that it's kind of laid out for you for everything that you need to know. So you'll start by identifying your global issue here. You'll identify the text, title, and author, and your second text, title, and author. Here you will place your, let's get this a little bit easier to see. I'm going to minimize this slightly so that we can see it all in one shot. Okay, you'll put your working thesis statement here. You might do that at the end. That's what I did. I did all the other stuff, and then I wrote my thesis statement after I determined what my analysis was going to look like. So, all these things coming up. The numbers provided for you here take you through the order you should do this. Okay, so the first thing you should do is what? So you'll go to each text and you'll identify what do you notice the author is doing. These are going to be from your global issue matrix, things like big ideas, patterns, trends, repetitions, figurative language, concepts. Okay, and so under here you would put the circumstances or context of the book or the 40-line set you pulled. What's generally happening in that moment? What do you notice that you might use as context when you're analyzing? Then you'll pick 2 intentional elements that the author is using in that 40-line set. So if they're using sensory details to reveal something about your issue, if they're using a symbol, if they're using a specific color in their visual images of the graphic novel to reveal something about this issue, this is where you'll identify 2 intentional elements, 2 techniques that the author has employed in order to address this concept. Then you'll do the same thing for text number 2. right? You'll identify the context of your second text. You'll identify 2 intentional elements that the author is using in that 40-line set. And then I would wait to do the conclusion until you've analyzed both texts, right? So I would just move through text 1 first. Once text 1 is done, then go to text 2. So within text 1, after you've done number 1, what? Then you'll move on to step number 2, which is how. This is when you really break down the moment, right? So in this moment, this is where you're going to find those key words and phrases that you unpack, and you find those connotations and denotations and the associations and the things that we typically understand about those ideas and what that might be revealing about the text. And that's where you move into your why, right? Why is this moment important? Why is this detail I saw, or this intentional element I saw important in relation to the global issue? What ultimately is the author trying to show me? Okay. Last but not least, you'll identify some fancy high-level words you can throw in to get the last criteria that makes you sound smart, right? So you'll pull these words possibly from language of the discipline category on your global matrix, okay? So use that global issues matrix. It's there to help build in for you some context, some background, some understanding of why these things might be important, okay? All of the italicized things here are actual topics from the global matrix. So you can go there to reference what you might put here, okay? After you've done step 4, then, like I said here, that's when I wrote my thesis. After I saw, hey, this author is doing this and this author is doing this, then I could come up with a thoughtful statement about the unique way that each author is approaching a particular concept. Lastly, you will then organize your ideas into some sort of structure that works for you. So for example, maybe you did text 1 here and you did text 2, but really text 2 is the one you want to talk about first. Well, if that's the case, then your number 1 would go here, and then you might talk about this intentional element next because it's not as strong as this one, and you want to end your argument with that intentional element. And then you would move into your next context. So you're essentially identifying, hey, what order is all of this going to go in for me, so that when you set up your outline, you know what's going to come first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, so on and so forth. Okay. Once you have all that done, then you can come up with some sort of ultimate conclusion. Essentially, your conclusion is going to be you restating your thesis that you'll say at the beginning in a new and fresh way. Okay. So just so you can see what this looks like in real form, I'm going to open up my example IA. Again, this is shared to empower for you. Right? So you'll see here I have my global issue, I have a working thesis statement, I have my texts, okay? And you could just take this and make a copy and then go through and make changes based on your text and what you've selected. My computer is moving so slow these days. Okay, so if I scroll down, the last thing I went through and did after all of my analysis was done is I decided to go in and put in transitions. These are going to be transitional words or phrases that help me connect my ideas, okay? So here I have what I notice about the context of my first text. And I just kind of explain that they're building an intimate relationship. Then I have these very specific quoted words and phrases, and I break them down, right? Looking at the ocean. Well, there's this idea of Yugen there. The ocean is vast and fluid, reminds us of the same aspects of life. Okay, and then here I have my big idea, and then these are the fancy words I'm going to throw in for that particular part of my analysis. Okay, so here I have this full thing filled out, ready to go. This is going to be my analysis, but when I do my practice IA, I can't read off of this. IB requires that I have a 10-point bullet outline. So what I did is I went through each area here. For example, if this is going to be the first piece I talk about after my thesis, then essentially this whole column can become one bullet point on my outline. So what I did is I went to each box and I found a keyword or phrase that would help me remember what I was going to say about that. And I color-coded it, right? So all of my whats are red. All of my hows are this gold. all of my Y's are blue and all of my fancy words are purple. So you'll see on my outline that what I've done is taken these keywords and phrases that remind me of my point, and I've placed those in the outline that I'm allowed to use. So now if I go take a look at that outline, you'll see here that this is the actual required document that you need to use. What you will have on here is your global issue. You will have the two texts chosen, right, and the authors that you used there. And let me scroll down. And you'll see here the 10 bullet points, right? So this is what I should be reading off of when I'm doing my analysis. Now, I know this looks like a lot, but color coding for me really helps, right? So I know that I am going to first give my thesis. I know that then I'm going to give my first point. Here's the what, here's the how, here's the why, and here's my fancy word I'm going to use. Okay, and I did that for each of the points that I plan to make in my analysis. My outline only ended up being 9 bullet points. That's totally fine. You just can't have more than 10. And then here ultimately end is my conclusion. So you will want to try to create the same thing. This is your first attempt at doing this, so don't worry. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're just trying to make it work the best you can with the two texts that you have chosen. Okay, this video is way longer than I wanted it to be, but I wanted to have a good resource here for you to be able to go back and look. So at this point, you will head over to Empower. You'll go open the IA prompt assignment, and you'll move on to the next step of completing this stuff and checking out these resources that I have provided for you. Again, as always, email me if you have questions, concerns, or confusions. I'm here for you. I'm thinking about you and miss you as always, and I hope you're all taking care. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.